welcome to Top of the Funnel, where content conversations begin. Today's guest is someone who has dabbled in so many industries that it is pretty mind-boggling that someone can be this talented, at least to me. He has worked with a lingerie company. He has worked at Myntra. He has worked at Urban Ladder and created some of the most fascinating newsletters that I have come across. And at the moment, he is the CMO of Scripbox, hugely popular FinTech brand. So from e-commerce to FinTech, I'm very excited to know about his journey when it comes to marketing and content. And he is none other than Manu Prasad, and he is finally, he's made the time to do this for us. I'm so excited, and I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation. So let's begin. Hi, Manu. Thanks so much for doing this. After so much back and forth, I'm glad you could make time to do it.
Thanks, Natasha. Happy to be here.
And so we'll get straight into it. Let's get straight into your journey, your very colorful and diverse career from Myntra to Urban Ladder and now Scriptbox in the FinTech space. I'd love to hear about your journey in your words, as a marketer, and also touch upon how you have seen the role of content sort of evolve over the years across these roles.
Sure. All right. So at the risk of revealing how old I am, my content play actually started quite a bit before that. So if I were to take it on a personal axis, then I began blogging in 2003. So that's about 18 years of blogging now. I was on Twitter from about 2007 or so. All of these are forms of content or micro content. Even in terms of the work per se, my initial years were in domains where the product was actually, where content was actually the product. So I worked with this company called WorldSpace back in 2003. You're probably too young to have heard about it. But basically, it had 40 radio stations, 40 plus radio stations delivered via satellite on a custom radio. So think of it as FM, but at home, because it wasn't really portable at that point in time. But you could tune into any sort of station that you wanted to. So in terms of content, if you look at it, it's super sharp segmentation, because the segmentation was by language. Obviously, the regional languages in India, from Hindi to Malayalam, Tamil, Bengali, everything. And also in terms of the genre of music that you are listening to, whether it's pop, rock, alternative rock, and even spiritual channels. So all of this in one radio box, and it was a subscription service. After that, I worked with both Midday as well as the Times Group. And in Times Group with multiple products, Mirror, TOI, Crest, all of that. So in that sense, the content was a product itself. So there was also a lot of, because Mirror was trying to appeal to a younger audience, I was also involved in tweaking the product in terms of the kind of content that would appeal to that. So we had Milliblog contributing for music. Karthik, still writes Milliblog. There was Wattblog for technology. Again, Watt Consult is still around, Rajiv. And we had gaming content written by somebody in-house. And then we had this entire campus squad called the Mirror Squad, which had campus reporters and journalists talking about things that matter to that young audience. So that was until about 2010. And so therefore, before I turn into a good old days kind of uncle, I'll answer your specific question in terms of Myntra and Urban Ladder after that. So Myntra was again a decade back. So this is early days of, reasonably early days of Myntra. Not the earliest days, but 2011 onwards is when I was there. And if you take it to decade back, fashion was not really an everyday thing. You really bought clothes only for occasions. And the entire task that was in front of us was to, how do you kind of make that a little more prevalent? And how do you democratize fashion per se? And make it more accessible to people. So one of the first things that I did there was to get a blog started on fashion. I think I still remember that was when Zara opened up shop in Bangalore, which is the first store in India. And that's like a big thing for all the fashionistas in office, because Zara was a major brand at that point in time. So we started the blog specifically because we wanted to get active on social. And then we were trying to figure out, okay, what is the content that we can put out there on social that will, that will talk about the brand and more about fashion, because that is the thing that we wanted people to focus around. So a bunch of things, right? Between the blogs and social, how do you get a celeb look was probably one of the easiest things to do. So all of these would seem very commonplace at this point in time, but this is a decade back, right? We used to run Twitter contests, hashtags that trended regularly around fashion. So even converting what you would not probably think about from a fashion point of view to something that could excite people on Twitter. For example, I remember this World Telecommunication Day around that time, and we did a quiz on Twitter which had to do with the old T9 sort of input in here, because the phones were also really old at that point in time compared to what we have now. So you had T9 text input happening. So the entire clue was around T9 text, and people with the fastest finger would, win the contest and stuff like that. So interesting things, again, built around fashion as a content category. And how do you do stuff around that? We had bloggers coming in, for tie-ups. We didn't call them influencers, and they were just bloggers, right? And we had this property called Star and Style, where we actually had stars. So Kalki or I remember Chitrangada, all of them choosing their own kind of ensemble on Myntra, and then content around that, a BTS or quiz around that, all of that as well. Instagram was still early days of Instagram, so it's very difficult to get shoots happening for Instagram and all that. Now you would think that that's basic, right? But then we used to go and make deals with the guys who did the product shots with the models and say, okay, give us about 3 to 4 exclusive pics. We'll be able to post it on Instagram, blah, blah, all of that. YouTube, again, was not really heavy at that point in time. We slowly started wading into YouTube. So that was Myntra. I think by the time I got into Urban Ladder, which is about 2014, again, furniture was a very visual category, like fashion. And lots of possible things on Insta. For instance, we did this entire thing called UL Stories, which is basically around customer stories and how the furniture fits into their life. Then even on YouTube, so we had this entire hub content that we created with pets, pets playing key roles in that aspect.
Oh my God, you guys, that newsletter you had, yeah.
Oh yes, I want to talk about the newsletter.
Personal favorite. I think we have used that as a reference across any company that I've worked in. That how do we make this newsletter happen, and how do you guys get these amazing those gifts and stuff, and they actually embed and they show up.
So I think we had a fabulous team working on the newsletters at Urban Ladder. I still remember them. I still remember vividly one of these. I think it was something called World Pirate Day or something like that. And actually, members of the team drew it out on something, cut it out, did the hard work of doing that motion thing with a camera. All with the, if you look at the output, you'll say, oh my God, all of that work for that little GIF that you wanted to create. But it's exactly this kind of feeling that, it evoked in customers. So that was a huge hit.
Totally. I mean, I remember it after so many years, and I remember giving these as references that how do we kind of make this happen? Like, how do we come out with a newsletter like this? So yeah, totally. I mean, I completely understand. And so visual, right? Yeah. Anyway, carry on, Manu.
I think all of the product shots plus these sort of things is what made, and you didn't have this, multitudes of newsletters happening to you at that point as a customer also. So today, if you say newsletter, you can already see people saying, I'm snoring kind of a effect, because every brand does. My health insurance sends me, and mail every day, and I'm like, why would I want to remember you on an everyday basis? Is how I think. But then you're marketeers, so we try to make maximum use of what we have as a resource. So in terms of the second part of your question, sort of the changes that I have seen, and it's quite a few, though it's more of a continuum than any very exact shift from one point to another. So like I said, I've seen content play across the spectrum, from are playing roles from demand generation to lead generation to engagement to conversion to retention and pretty much everything in between, right? And because of the way news and information distribution has changed, we are actually now coming back to content as a product. So if you look at news outlets, right from ET downwards, you've got newsletters happening on a daily basis which try to do storytelling. And if you ask about it, okay, for newsletters, it's for newspapers, it's probably advertising is a end product, but still it's a content play, and you have very specialized newsletters. You got Substack and people going off and throwing their expertise in Substack and creating paid form of newsletters that people would pay to buy, just because of the expertise in that kind of content. So in that sense, it's actually back to a product. And if you take something like, let's say, movies or TV shows or OTT shows rather, or music, a lot of content is actually a byproduct. For instance, behind the scenes, right? It's a byproduct of the actual content that you're creating, but you're able to package it as behind the scenes and say that, hey, you know what, this is also great content that you should watch. You've got everything from a motion poster upwards to the actual movie getting released. It's an entire process. Ditto for shows as well. So the entire function of content has gone through an entire roller coaster and continues to do. The next thing would be probably the format of it. I was just telling you about how difficult it was to create a custom GIF or even an image. And today you have this thing, and you can probably shoot an image, video, sound, and not just for creation, but also in terms of consumption. And for me to on a TikTok probably get my own video created or manufactured right in 30 seconds and get onto the platform. So how difficult is it to create and consume content? The third thing probably is the freedom of choice. So you can probably watch yoga sessions on a YouTube channel or on OTT or your Insta reel or anywhere. And the next thing that comes up with probably would be 10 easy recipes to stuff your face with. So you've got yoga content and eating content happening side by side on the same platform. Just the freedom of choice of the kind of content you can consume. And then obviously there is the entire fleeting nature of the content that we see right now, right? So whether it is stories or Snapchat, that ephemeral content that exists only for a certain amount of time and then you move on in life, is also something that has changed massively. Because earlier, when you used to produce content, the amount of effort, resources that went into it, whether it's time or money or any of that, because that content had a large shelf life, versus what you see now, you shoot, done, you're over with, one day later the content is gone from the planet. It exists in servers, but you at least don't see it in the larger world. So I think these are probably the function, format, the freedom of choice, the fleeting nature of content. All of these are probably changes that I've seen in the last few years.
So now let's talk about Scripbox a little bit, right? Because I'm very curious to know that how did this happen? You moved from all these very colorful B2C sort of industries to FinTech. And I can imagine it was a great challenge and that would be a great appeal. But let's talk about that a little bit, that transition.
Sure. So I have sold a bunch of things online, right? So I've sold fashion, I've sold furniture, I've sold lingerie also. There's a company called Buttercups I consulted with for a while. I think probably I'm atoning for making people spend on stuff that they shouldn't be spending on, and trying to get them to save and invest now. Probably because I've also gotten older, right? So I think from if I have to bring it to the context of this discussion, technically speaking, I've probably got one team working with me that is designated content. But if I look at all the teams that work with me, whether it's brand or creative or PR, essentially all of their jobs revolve around content production of some sort, whether it's brand campaigns, paid marketing, collateral, or even marketing automation, communication, call scripts. Everything is actually content that you're trying to pass on. And Scriptbox is also, while you can call it FinTech, it's probably a little more wealth management and definitely B2C. So it's still B2C. It's not really going to the B2B area. But overall, if you talk of all of the work that I am doing, it's content in a way, but it's only the use cases and context that actually change depending on who is working on them and what they are working on. But think of it from a customer's perspective also, from let's say a jobs to be done for the customer, right? The way I see it, all people would like to worry less about money. I don't think, I think that most people in the world would say, okay, I don't want to think about my finances, and my finances should be sorted, right? Some people are actively searching for it. So you know, the entire discussion is around either you know, a transaction way, that I call it. So the search that will be most common is probably best mutual funds, right? Or it could even be in the form of a relationship. Let's take a long tail keyword. How do I find a trusted financial advisor? So if you begin to type, how do I find a trusted financial advisor, would probably be second or third in your overall search result. So if you look at this, they're completely two different conversations that are happening, right? So what is the content that you would link them to? Is it a blog? Is it a sales pitch in the form of a landing page, right? And this is the people who are actively looking for all this. Some people are not even actively looking. It's in the back of their mind, but they're not really actively looking. So let's say on a display channel like a Facebook or a LinkedIn, what is a kind of content that would spark a thought? And as a brand, we don't want to do this entire fear thing. You know, you will die and your family will, you know, will get be on the street, so you need to ensure your all of that. It's a very negative way of approaching what can be a positive, because money is important in life, but you don't need to approach it from a fear perspective. You can also approach it from a, this is good for you and this is how you can do things so that you are taken care of in your own life. I do even want to talk about afterlife and things, right? So that's where we are. So let's assume that both of these kind of search as well as the display kind of people are now on to some sort of idea about money. How do you engineer the rest of the journey, right? This is not really an impulse purchase decision. So you got a 10% off on the dress that you were looking at. Okay, let's buy, right? This is not that kind of a decision. So how can you help the customer with the decision-making process? What are the things that are important for the customer, right? And therefore, what is the role of content there? What kind of educational content can you spin out? Whether it's how should I even start saving for my child's education, or you know, generally in the how-to space or tips and all of that. And we on the blog, for instance, have about more than 1,000 articles on different aspects of this wealth management, whether it's you know, retirement or child's education, all of that. YouTube also has quite a lot of specific content on these topics, in addition to things like investing biases. So what are the biases that guide your thinking, and how could that prevent you from getting to a certain goal? How could it you know, make you take decisions that are not really optimal for your future growth of your money, all of that, right? And now let's say a customer is reasonably convinced with the fact that okay, these guys are good, they have some understanding of the domain, you know, your utility part of it, which is investing in good things, are taken care of. Then what do you do to convince them? Maybe you run a few testimonials. Okay, these are people like you who have taken the decision to invest with Scripbox, and they're doing good now, and they're happy to talk about it. So these are different levels of the funnel, if you look at it in terms of what they are doing. But actually, what I think in this domain, the real work starts after you have gotten the customer, because it's not like there are no you know, returns in investments. I mean, there are returns, but not the returns of the e-commerce kind, right? You can't send your stuff back and say that okay, I need my money refund. It doesn't work like that. It's a completely different context altogether. So how do you ensure that the customer remains happy after they've started investing with you? What is the kind of information again that is useful for the customer? So we have something called News That Matters, which probably comes out twice a week on the app. So there are lots of things that are happening. There is noise all around. How are you able to filter that noise into a signal that is actually contextually relevant to the customer, so that he or she is able to make better financial decisions? In addition to that, we also have research papers that offer insights. Again, decision making. What are the trends that I should be looking at? Why are they important to me? What should I do to make sure that I don't miss out on the trend, and yet I'm not, you know, doing a trigger action of, oh, Bitcoin is hot, let's go buy Bitcoin. That kind of a decision. How does it become part of your overall portfolio? Does it even deserve to be a part of the portfolio? What percentage of your portfolio should have Bitcoin? These are all questions that you should try and answer before you say, okay, the whole world is on NFTs and Bitcoin, so therefore I'm jumping into crypto right away. So these are the kind of, so all of this, if you think about it, content plays a huge role in how you're able to have those conversations with the customer and how you're able to help the customer in moving forward.
So what I'm hearing is that a majority of the approach is very funnel driven, right? You're taking them through the funnel. It's highly educative, informational, not kind of, I mean, it's not unlike your earlier industries. There's no sale, like, you know, there's no sale to be made. You have to make sure these guys are going along with you. So the approach is very different. So on that note, if I were to ask you, what are those 2 or 3 pillars of your content strategy, and if you can break those down for me, and also maybe help me understand the structure of your team. So how does it really work? How it is a vast amount of content that you're creating. It is also the quality, the relevance. What's the right word? It has to be correct. The accuracy of the content. These are aspects that are now so relevant. It's no longer like fashion where you can perhaps it's not based on accuracy per se, right? There's a lot more room for creativity there.
Yeah. There's a lot more subjectivity there. And in our case, so I think if I have to look at it from there is always a marketing content that you call, which is to do with providing a deep understanding of what we are as a service provider to you, right? And then there is the customer side of it, which is about what does a customer want to know so that he or she would sign up with you and continue to remain invested in you. So a lot of it is educational, like I said at the top of the funnel. A lot of it is also journey mapping and communication for that. And then again, you start splitting it by channel, right? So in this journey, you would have emails, you would have notifications, you would have SMS, you would have nudges within the product. All of these are content also. So, and then there is a brand content part of it. And probably we can talk about that later also, of not just the ads that you have going out, but also in terms of, the very fact that you said, okay, you're coming from that entire, dynamic world of e-commerce, whether it's fashion or furniture, into FinTech, right? It's a dry subject. How do you make it interesting for the customer, right? While you want to talk about money, you also don't want to talk about it and like, oh my God, this is so boring that I don't even want to talk about money. So these are the, I think, different aspects of the content. So we don't really think about it as content pillars per se. Because that then kind of, the way I see it, maybe chains you into a way of writing or creating content that might not be optimal for the customer. So we look at it more from a customer journey point of view. What are the various parts of it that we can work around? What content at what point of time in what format really works for the customer, right? Whether it's visual, whether it's video, whether it's audio, whether it's written content, what is it that actually works for the customer? To give you an idea of the team, like I said, I've got about 3-4 teams working with me. Within the content team, we actually work with a lot of freelance writers. We have a couple of writers on board. And they deal with a bunch of content. So there's a lot of work on, let's say, SEO, which is completely outsourced. We obviously have, so we do more of an editing job of all of that as opposed to hiring this army of writers. So the old way of SEO is a little bit gone. I mean, I remember the time when we used to have literally an army of people who just churn out SEO content in all of these e-commerce companies. Right now that it's more tech SEO, it's much easier for you to create clusters, work around that, and be clear about the kind of content that you're. And Google is also tending towards that if it is useful for the user, I will rank you up, right? So then it becomes much more easier for us to actually create content that is useful for the customer, and not just really punch it with density of keywords to ensure that the search engine crawler would pick it up. So I think things have changed there also. So that's the rough structure of the team. So you got brand, you got PR, you got creative, and then you have a bunch of writers who are in the editorial content team, who write both the blogs as well as the SEO content, as well as also help in the other kind of formats of content that we are talking about, whether it's video or anything else.
So can you talk about so other kind of content? I mean, I just want to understand. You spoke about video, YouTube, things like that. So what is your thought process there in terms of the different formats that are available in this space? And how does that sort of play in your content strategies level? Like, is that something that you begin with? Is that a starting point that, okay, how can we use this per channel? How do we repurpose this for another channel? Or are you creating content for specific channels, to begin with?
The latter, actually, because the moment we say refurbish this entire content for use case, we are assuming that the user is on that platform with a certain use case. So if you look at search, and I'm going to ignore search for a while because it's more technical content. But if you look at, let's say, YouTube as a search channel, right? How do you consume different channels? You don't go to YouTube and look at your feed and say, oh, what should I watch today? Typically, you're probably going to YouTube searching for something, looking at that video, and then there is a little rabbit hole that you fall down to because recommended videos start following one after the other, right? So it's more of a search engine than an actual display medium in that sense. So what we would like to do, therefore, is to catch their attention. There is enough search happening on wealth management, mutual funds, etc., for us to capitalize on. But if you look at, let's say, a Facebook or a LinkedIn or even an Amazon, this is basically people who have not come there for a specific. And Facebook and let's say LinkedIn are different from, let's say, an Amazon, right? Because an Amazon is still a display channel where you've come for shopping, and I am showing you something that is that I think is useful to you. You might want to click it and come through, right? And that's an ad. But in, let's say, Facebook and a LinkedIn, you're on your feed because you want to basically spend some time on the feed. You don't have a very vested interest at that point in time to consume a certain kind of thing, unlike a search or a YouTube or even an Amazon. Therefore, my opportunity to tell you an interesting story and engage with you are completely different, right? Now, if I thought about it, okay, these are my content pillars. When I make a piece of content, I have to recreate it on multiple platforms, and that entire strategy goes for a toss. So we would rather look at Facebook and say, okay, what are people there for, right? How can I, with a creative, whether it's static or video or whatever, how can I make it interesting so that the customer will be drawn into that and then start exploring the overall journey, right? As opposed to a YouTube where I say that, okay, people are coming to search for XYZ thing. How do I show a relevant video that will satisfy that search as well as bring that customer onto our website? So they're distinctly different. So we don't have a strategy of, okay, I'm repurposing this for everything.
So channel first, you're creating for the
Absolutely,
channel.
absolutely. Because channel defines usage, usage defines the kind of content that you would want to show.
Okay, so what do you see are the two biggest challenges and two things that excite you the most about the role of content in the fintech space? So two challenges and two things that you're excited about.
So I think the first thing obviously is the mental availability of the customer. So I can say, hey, I'm a fintech player and I'm doing this, but to the customer, it's an infinite feed of content. I don't care whether you're fintech or ordering food or whatever it is that you're doing. It doesn't matter. Mine is an infinite feed, and in that I have to cut through the clutter and the noise, and that is a challenge. That is the primary challenge. How can I make it interesting when you've got a 10% off happening somewhere and you're drawn to that, as opposed to, okay, this is good for your long term, you need to start investing now, is a huge challenge in itself, right? And by fintech, I'm restricting myself to investing, and I'm not really talking about loans because that's easy. Giving money is reasonably more easy, I would think, than asking people to start investing money. And there is no instant gratification also. I can't tell you that by tomorrow your money will grow by X and reach this particular state. It will take a few years. While on the other hand, here is something even in fintech that I'm going to give you money, and yeah, you have to repay it, but for now you get money, and that's instant gratification, right? And all of this in the context of the customer's life, where he's also looking at a bunch of e-commerce discounts that are flowing down as stuff, or entertainment. Hey, here is a new Netflix show that you want to see. That's a challenge in itself. And you talk about decreasing attention spans in this context, and it's like a double whammy. So first being interesting, and the second, okay, I'm not even interested for 10 seconds. How do you do all of this, right? So that's the first challenge. And I think the second challenge, which I think probably doesn't get spoken about a lot, is the decreasing shelf life of platforms itself, right? It's not a new problem. So if I look back to the early days of Facebook, we could actually build an organic following on Facebook by doing the hard work of creating great content, right? So brands invested in content. I know Myntra did. But over a period of time, you actually have to pay the audience that you only had attracted. So what happens to all of these investments that you made, right? And what utility value of it is? So you have to change your entire set of processes and the way you think about it and make it different, right? Let's say to give you a contemporary example, in the last couple of years, think of TikTok, right? Practically every brand wanted to jump into it with something or the other, right? Arrived and disappeared all in the span of 1 to 2 years. So the complexity of things, and why did that happen? Because it is a government ban. It was not even like a technical disaster or something like that. So the complexity of things that could affect a content strategy and how you invest in something have multiplied like crazy. And today, if you are somebody in marketing who wants to think about content, I think you also have to look at all of those aspects and say, where would you buy, where would you rent, and where would you invest? And then you have to take those decisions. So that's a major challenge itself. We can do something in the moment and get it, but Is that a concrete content strategy for a while is something that you need to think about. There's enough challenges, so I've given you two. So let me talk about the opportunities, which is a better place to play at, right? I think both of the opportunities that I see are connected to storytelling as an overall umbrella, right? And better storytelling at it. I think because of the explosion of not just content, but content creators, formats, and the options available, therefore just explore, right? You've got branded content, you've got native advertising, you've got product placement. You can basically find context and people reasonably easily that connect with your brand ethos. It's not a small shelf from which you have to choose. And there are new ways of mixing community, content, commerce. All of that is emerging. Platforms themselves are working towards it. So this gives you a tremendously good opportunity for better storytelling. So that's on that side. And on the technology side also, things are changing, right? So if you've got, let's say, AR, you've got VR, you've got gaming platforms. My sense right now is that probably the next generation of marketers will start calling social media legacy media. Like we used to call traditional media legacy medium. These days will say that, okay, social media is just, it's so 2010s. Let's talk about, the current stuff that is actually happening there. Let's get onto Fortnite. Let's get onto Discord. That's what they will be talking about. So this entire technology explosion and the kind of things that it opens up for people, content creators as well as marketers, that is probably the second biggest opportunity that I'm seeing.
Okay, so you spoke about storytelling, and then previously you also touched about branded campaigns. So now, I'd love to hear about any successful campaigns that you would like to talk about, and also maybe also attribute that success in terms of content. I'd love to understand basically how do you measure that success when it comes to content?
Sure. So, since you spoke about finance being a dry subject, I think one of my favorite campaigns. So, and this is not probably the best campaign or most successful campaign that I did. It's just one campaign, not campaign, but it's more of a playlist that we've created on YouTube that I'm very fond of. So it's called FUQ, right? And it stands for frequently unasked questions, right? It's about the questions that people do not ask in the context of wealth management. So I'll give you a very simple example. Like I said before, the search query probably in mutual funds that's got the highest volumes would be best mutual funds or something around that, right? So now let's say you decided to buy a few mutual funds based on those 300,000 million results that your search pages show. Somehow you managed to figure out the mutual fund that you wanted to buy. And then let's say 3 months later, you're running that query again, right? Most likely you won't find the same funds. It will be a different set of funds. There will be overlaps, but there will be a different set of funds. So what do you know? Are you supposed to sell those original ones? What happens to your exit loads? What happens to your capital gain taxes? Have you even thought about that? So the fundamental thing that I'm trying to point out is that even the right questions to ask. Right? Is the best mutual fund even the right question to ask? It's not even right mutual fund, by the way. It's the best mutual fund. So best in what context? We'll figure out later. So our overall objective, I think, from a content play is to help people make better decisions when it comes to managing their money, right? So yes, you have these webinars and you have expert speaks, and we have done our share of them. Also continue doing that, right? But we wanted to, change it from a standard Gyan session where somebody is talking to you. We still have to have somebody talking to you, but can we take it to more of a storytelling aspect? Right. So what we did was we took examples from why Napoleon failed to the 2008 recession to why Singapore has developed like this, etc., to make the point that we were making. So we've got 7-8 videos happening in the series which talk about very different aspects of wealth management and the important questions you should be asking when you're investing. So one of the challenges that we had set for ourselves was exactly what I spoke about earlier, that how can we make this subject a little more interesting to users? Right, so they're plugged into 2 to 5 minutes of listening to this and saying, okay, these guys make a little sense. So let me start thinking about money differently. So that in itself was a kind of a metric of success for us, right? Then obviously your other metrics like, okay, what's my number of views? What is the cost per view? From that, am I getting visitors onto the website? Well, how are those visitors behaving? Are they bouncing off, or are they spending some time on blog? What are those things that we can measure by? So in all of those also, it was a fairly successful endeavor. So we did a playlist of 7 and said now we have to rethink and figure out some other way of doing this as well. But overall, the quality of the messaging and the reaction it got was something that we would say that defines our success more than anything else.
And this is just something I'm asking off the top of my head. I feel like a lot of this finance content is becoming so much more accessible to younger audiences, right? And it's an ecosystem. You can see it as an ecosystem play. It's not just Scripbox. There's, FinShots is trying to also do that content. Cred is obviously, you look at their ads and you know that there is a certain target audience they are looking at.
Absolutely.
So is that, I mean, I would believe that as a marketer is really exciting, right? When you're trying to touch upon a new demographic altogether.
So actually for us, it's the flip side. Our focus is actually on the 35 plus customer.
Okay.
So while we're not saying that, okay, this is bad for people aged 35 and below, it is that our focus in terms of content creation, like I said, so that's why we move it from FinTech to more of wealth management.
Right.
So it is and there is a reason for that. I think people are a little more conscious about their future. What do they need to do for it?
Yeah.
Their investments are of a larger ticket size because they know that, okay, to educate a child, you need this much. Therefore, I need to start investing right now. So that level of maturity, I think it makes it better to build financial products for that generation or that cohort of customers as opposed to the younger generation, which is like, oh my God, you not got Bitcoin. I'm not investing on this platform. Right. That's the level. And this is not against Bitcoin by such an imagination. It's just that you are young, you want to try out new things. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So how do you build different, and your view, you think of yourself as immortal. Your view of the long term is like forever. We don't need to plan anything at all because, hey, life will go on. This is the way it is. But when you get to your mid-30s, you say, okay, life is not going to go on just like that. I need to do a little bit of planning to get there. I would say even 30. That's when lifestyle changes happen to you, right? Your health, your family expands, you suddenly have aspirations that you never thought you would. All of those things start to happen to you.
But I wouldn't, I mean, I'm curious, did COVID change this? Do you see those cohorts changing at all? No.
Not a lot. People are definitely more conscious of having an emergency fund and making sure that you have enough in stock for you to tide over these circumstances. But think about it from people are back to Manali and Goa. So this normalization in your head, I think, happens very, very, very fast. We suddenly get afraid and we suddenly get unafraid about all of these. And the younger you are, I think, the more it works because you probably have the energy to take on the world at that point in time. And you believe you can be in the world, which is not bad. Right? It's just that the mindset is different at that age from what you are when you're. That's about it.
Yeah. Okay, my last and final question for you. And we spoke about the past of content marketing. We spoke about the present, and now I would love to know from you, what is the future of content, specifically in the FinTech space, looking like for you? I think you talked about the opportunities, and I feel like a lot of that will be part of this answer.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, what is it that you're looking at going forward?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of crystal gazing, but if I look at numbers, for instance, digital ad spend in India back in 2010 was in the 4 or 5-ish range, in the early single digits, right? It's now at about 28%. So about 11 years, 7x jump is what has happened roughly. In the US right now, it's probably closer to 60 odd percentage, if I'm not mistaken. So about 66, 2/3 of the spend is on digital. So there is a huge headroom for us to actually grow even from an overall volume game, if you talk about it, right? So in that sense, if I look at the future of digital marketing is absolutely bright. Now, specifically in the FinTech space, I'll be a little more qualitative about why I think content will play a big role. So if you look at it, especially in the last year or so, with a lot of other domains, there's been a very high level of digital transformation that has happened in personal finance as well. Right from using Google Pay for transactions to, okay, what are the options available for transacting online, right?
Yeah.
And customers therefore are at different, I would say different stages of maturity. Right. To begin with, probably they just want a frictionless transaction. Can you just buy financial products the way you would buy at Amazon? It's as easy as that. You've got reviews and then you buy products and you're happy, right? But as you become a little more mature, you probably want a little more help in decision making in terms of, is it right for me? Therefore, it needs to be personalized. If I take it one more notch above, your relationship, at least for an older generation, was with your advisor, was with your relationship manager in a bank. What does it take to replicate that online? All right. Would you even trust a digital financial service to have a relationship with that service online? Uh, and if yes, and it has to be yes, because the entire thing is moving online. Now, how does the entire process play out in digital? And therefore, as a marketer, you would think, what are the marketing interventions possible there, right? And how can content play a part with it? So now, if you just so lots of variables here, right? So who is the audience? Like you said, right? There is a demographic that you're targeting. What is the product or service that you are selling, right? But now, if you just step back a little bit and think of it from a cultural nuance point of view, as a culture, we don't have deep conversations with money, right? Money is a taboo subject. You don't ask somebody's salary. You don't say anything. None of that actually happens, right? So, if I have to say, what is the best way to what is one of the better ways to start a conversation here? I would put a lot of onus on content, that it is okay to talk about it, right? You talk about mental health now. Suddenly there is a bunch of content that is happening around mental health, right? What about financial health, right? You should talk about that also, right? Because it actually has a lot of role to play in mental health, right? So the amount of directions at which you can go on this, and specifically in terms of using content to get an entry point into that conversation, is extremely huge. I'm not even getting into formats and all of that, right? At this point. But therefore, I feel the content marketing part of it, content as well as the content marketing part of it, have an extremely bright future in the fintech space. Now let's talk about formats, right? So once upon a time, we had social networks. Now we have AI-powered interest networks like TikTok. So that itself is a huge change. Not social anymore, but it's more interest related. Not that Reddit never existed, but there's a new form of interacting with content. And the beauty of it is that without even understanding the overall cultural nuances of the land, you are still able to throw the machine learning is, and the AI is able to throw so much of content at you that within the span of 2-3 days, you've already got, okay, the landscape of this guy, right? And what is the kind of content that they would like without any understanding of what is the background of the game. So it's amazing in that sense. And that's just one part of it. Right? Gaming, like I said, as a platform is booming. Now, desperately, there are brands wanting to be on Fortnite or already on Fortnite. You've got Marvel and DC on the same platform. That's like a huge thing for me, right? How does that even happen in life? And if you look at podcasts and Discord, they're forcing you to have some sort of sound strategy to your overall play of things. So there is such a lot of things happening around from a format, platform, all of this. If you look at Amazon, it's actually building out this influencer program and live shopping tools, right? So you can practically the entire thing that happens on TV where Kharido kind of thing is also going to happen on Amazon. Facebook apparently has got about 10,000 engineers working on AR and VR, right? And is getting ready to start showing ads on Oculus. So your entire arena of warfare has changed to something like AR and VR, and how can you even show stuff in that? So in that sense, I would say we only scratch the surface of what content is possible and what are the kind of media in which that content will play. So if I have to think of it in a slightly more philosophical way, and I think I just tweeted that sometime back also. First, we use social platforms to share moments, right? Then we started shifting to creating moments so that we could share them. Right now, we are on to creating only those moments that we feel will get appreciated or validated. Right? So first, the tools came. We shaped our tools, and the tools started shaping us and our behavior. So in that sense, I think we are far away from realizing what this will do to us as a species or an individual, let alone what marketing to do and what content we have to do on that. So we're still in the early learning stages of it. So that's where I leave it.
Yeah, I think we have our work cut out for us with all the changes that are happening in terms of platforms and technology. It's intimidating and overwhelming. Yeah, but it's
also exciting.
Also exciting, yeah. On that note, Manu, thank you so much for your time. This was a great conversation.